Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the Eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the Eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. Okay, we're back with Eldritch Avenue, and I'm going to do one more part or installation of the Elvin secret stairs, simply because there's one big story that needs to be told, even though there's like a lot of other little weird ones, partial ones or dream state ones. But it was so striking in form and content, and it was one of those high strangeness things where reality shifted, something changed, as if there were another aspect to our reality. Like I don't know, I don't even know how I'm just going to sound like somebody trying to fabricate an understanding of something that was purely imaginary. And I do have to qualify this one story as sort of like, I can't place it in this reality. Because, even though it happened in the middle of the day, I can't say that it wasn't dream state. And that's where that's at. So I am qualifying it as something that, happened, in the middle of the day. I don't know. And I'll just tell you the story and you can just hear how it plays out. And then you'll, I guess, understand a little bit better, because when it was all said and done, it was just sort of like, I don't even know how to quantify it. So I would say, we're back in the mid 90s, late 90s, I suppose it was. I was living in a ground floor apartment in an old Victorian building, a beautiful old Victorian house that was kind of dilapidated, but it was still. And I lived on the ground floor, and I lived alone. And it was middle of the day. It was one of those beautiful early June days where there wasn't humidity yet. There wasn't a killer heat yet. But everything was green and, it's just gorgeous sunny day. The sky is just, radiant with giant fluffy clouds. At that apartment, I had a rather extensive, flower garden that I transformed that yard. When I moved in, that place looked like, the front yard looked like war-torn Europe, because whoever lived there before me had literally staked their dogs out in the yard, and they just dug all these huge holes, and it So I spent years transforming that yard into a beautiful Victorian or English garden. And so I was always out in my garden, gardening and weeding and whatnot. And so I had just done all this gardening and weeding the day before. So the gardens just looked glorious and there was nothing to do. And I had just sort of, taken a cruise through the gardens to see what was, how the gardens are doing, and it was one of my favorite things. And I'm back in the house and it's middle of the afternoon. It was early afternoon. It was just after lunch time. And I at that time, I was about in my mid-30s for sure. Definitely in my mid-30s. So I was still quite young. And back at that time, I never took naps. I just didn't take naps. I just never did. I was pretty hyper and I just never took naps at all, and that's all there was to that. And I'm in my apartment. I remember I was standing in the dining room. And of course the dining room was between the living room and the hallway to the kitchen. And my bedroom was just off of the dining room. It was the other connecting room. And, I'm sort of standing there. It's a great, glorious day. And I was sort of trying to decide I wanted to work on an art project or something. And all of a sudden, I just started feeling incredibly tired. Like just incredible, immense weariness settled down upon me. Like I was really tired. And I mean, literally, it was the strangest thing. Like I should go lay down. And I just was like, I'm going to go lie down. Because then I felt like, am I going to faint? What is going on here? I just had no clue what was happening, and it came on so quickly. And I was heading, I'm like, for the bedroom. And I get into the bedroom and it's not a big bedroom. And I remember my last thought before I passed out was that I hope I make it to my bed because I recognize now that I'm losing consciousness. And I was sort of like, what? I don't know why this is happening, but I know I'm like either passing out or fainting or I'm losing consciousness, and I don't want to fall and hit my head and have some kind of serious injury. So I wanted to make sure. And I remember just the last moment I realized as I gotten close enough to my bed and I sort of launched myself into a fall towards the bed so that I wouldn't fall and get hurt. And I sort of felt this moment of relief when I realized I'm going to land in the bed okay. And just as I started to feel myself coming down onto the bed, I blacked out. And then there was this, the next thing I recall, there's what I describe as a rushing. And I don't know how to describe that because it was this is a part where everything was dark. It was black. And I was discombobulated in my thought process. And so this is sort of a fractured juncture of the story of the memory. Because after when it was over, I kind of I'm going to write all this down, because that was my practice. I don't know what that was. I used to have and that was when I was keeping a dream journal really regularly. So, but anyway, there's this rushing. It's complete blackness. Very vaguely aware of this rushing, and it was like I was on a rail car or some vehicle on rails. But I was moving at a really high speed but I didn't notice things moving past me. I just felt like I was moving. And it was hard to imagine. This moving was weird because it was almost like the space around me was moving, but I was not moving. And that was just the strange sensation of how once I was recalling it after it happened, I'm like, yeah, that was really weird. And I went back into it and just analyzed the feeling. And then, of course, it all went, into a journal. But there's this rushing and then black. And then all of a sudden, I'm standing in my mother's driveway in Iowa. A moment before, I was standing in my living room in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But a little bit suddenly, I'm like a moment later standing in my mother's driveway. And it was I was very disoriented because I'm like, what the hell's going on? And it was, glorious sunny day. The sky was filled with big, giant, fluffy cumulus clouds, and the thing about this moment standing in my mother's driveway was all the colors were just so incredibly vivid. And all of everything I was looking at was so crystal clear. Everything was just extra sharp, in its detail and its form and its contours and all the details of each leaf and every flower and all the rocks. I remember staring down at the gravel on my mom's driveway, like kind of trying to fix the moment. And I'm standing next to her big May bush, which was still in bloom, and the petals were now falling, and so there's petals everywhere, on the ground, and I'm sort of just like, and there's dappled light from the locust tree there, and I just sort of like look up, and around, and I suddenly realized that there was no bug noises, no bird noises, and at my mom's place, she's in the country. And it's just like, there's trees everywhere. She's got all these bird feeding stations and there's flowers everywhere. She's an avid gardener. So, her yard is literally a throng of bird song and birds everywhere. Not to mention crickets and grasshoppers, because that house is surrounded by meadow on like 3 sides. There's like our fields on 2 sides. There's the meadow across the road. And it's just meadow everywhere. So it's just like there's always like a cacophony of bug noises, when you're in the country, especially at night, it's just like this intense buzzing sound of a million different bug noises, crickets and grasshoppers and katydids and all of that stuff and cicadas. And there was nothing. There was no bird song. There's no birds chirping or anything, which there normally was, like I said, many, many, many birds all the time. No bugs. It was just completely quiet. And I remember thinking this is so incredibly weird. And we're like, what is going on? And I was just coming to the full realization of why are there no bugs and no birds? Why am I standing in my mom's driveway? And suddenly I shot up into the air. At a really extreme rate of speed, I shot up into the air, just flew off the ground. I don't know, I was launched or something. And I remember being so startled by the speed at which I was traveling through the air. And I remember what really made this memory lock into my consciousness was I had, my shirt was flapping so furiously at the rushing of wind because I was moving so fast. And the collar on the shirt was like a button up shirt with short sleeves, and it had a larger collar. And that collar, had these little inserts in them to keep the collar point sharp. And that kept whipping me along the side of my face, like my neck and my jaw, and I could I could hear my shirt flapping in the wind, and I could feel it sort of paddling my neck and my face a little bit because I was moving so fast. And I'm just going up in the air, just incredibly fast. And then all of a sudden I begin to slow to sort of, I guess, a stop. And I am up amongst all of the clouds. And of course, it was just big, giant cumulus clouds. Not storm clouds, just big, giant cumulus clouds everywhere. And there was distance between the clouds too, but it was just incredible. And I'm just sort of what the hell? And I sort of rotate in the air a little bit, and I see, as I turn to my right, I see this huge